boys and girls, it's me, Miss Gante, and you already know what time it is. It's time to use our brain and become scientists. Today we are going to continue being scientists, having a science experiment. Remember, as scientists, we've talked about in the first video, we have to observe, we have to notice, we have to be able to communicate what we understand. We have to be able to problem solve if it's not working for us the first time. We can't just quit. We have to have that growth mindset and persevere. We have to keep trying. We have to wonder, well, what questions can we ask next? This lesson we talked about soil. So we talked about 4 different types of soil. Specifically, that was silt, sand, clay, and loam. All this talking about soil really made me wonder. And maybe you guys were wondering this too. Could we plant or could we grow vegetables in all the 4 types of soils that we talked about last time? Take a moment to think about this. If you need to pause the video, that's okay. So think about, can plants grow vegetables, whatever plant, flowers, whatever you're thinking of, do you think that they can grow in all 4 of the soil types that we were reviewing? So then that question had me thinking about another question. Maybe it's not about what type of soil we're using for plants. Maybe we need to dig deeper and think about, well, can those types of soils, can all of them hold water the same way? I want you guys to think about that for a sec. Can all of those soils hold water the same way? So in today's experiment, we're not going to be growing 4 different types of plants from 4 different types of soils, because we don't even know if those soils are going to be retaining water. What does retention mean? Retention is the action of absorbing and continuing to hold a substance. So for example, if I wanted to say, I need to test out our soil's retention of water. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be taking different types of soils and we're going to see if they retain water. So make sure you have your listening ears and whatever your science journal or pencil paper ready to take some notes, because we're about to observe and do our experiment. All right, everyone, so you have heard me talk about this experiment long enough. Let's get into it. We're about to go into my workstation. So over in my workstation, first, I'm going to introduce all the materials that we are going to need. After, I'm going to read out our procedure that we're going to follow, and we can pause the video to just label some of our expectations or our hypothesis. All right, everyone, so this is my workstation. So I'm going to be walking around just to talk about everything that we're going to be using. So the first thing that I have are these glass jars, and I really like these glass jars because they already have our measurements that we can use in milliliters when we're measuring how much water for the water retention and how much water, you know, goes through the soil. I have our coffee filters. So you might have these around the house, or you may have these at school, and I'm going to be using this to filter through our soil. So we have 4 types of soil today, and I am going to start with our red clay. This is our topsoil. This is our sand. Over here we have our loam. So we're going to be using these 4 jars to be testing these 4 types of soils. Over here, cups of water, and then finally I have my measuring cup that I'm going to use to be measuring the water into the different jars. Now, you might be telling me, Miss Gante, I don't have the cups. It's okay, because you might have this in your house. This is a water bottle. Bought it at Kroger. All you're going to need, and you might need some adult help for this, we have a pair of scissors, and we are going to cut this water bottle. So if you just saw, I just took a little snip, and we're just going to move it down. There we go. Look at that. And you can even cut this cut the label off so that you're able to observe. But remember what I said a while ago, we're scientists. We have to be innovators. We have to adapt. We have to persevere. So, if you do not have glass jars, you can use a water bottle. We're going to grab our coffee filters. Now you only need one. All right, boys and girls, so now I have our materials ready. Now, I have our jars with our measurements up at the front. I have our cup ready for when we put in our water. And actually, because the opening of our bottle is so narrow, I have decided to change it to 1/4 of a cup. So here is a cup, a full cup. This is 1/4 of a cup. Now, why did I change it? I changed it because as scientists, sometimes our first idea isn't always going to be our right idea. We have talked about how science is trial and error. What is sometimes right might not always be right and always work. So this is our first change that I've already made. I went from a full cup to 1/4 of a cup. All right, boys and girls, so let me move all my materials to the side. This is where we're going to be making our observations. So this is a great time to pause the video and think, which one do we think is going to retain the most water? We have clay, topsoil, sand, and loam. Now remember, which one retains the most water isn't necessarily going to mean that it has the most water in the jar. It's actually the opposite. The jar, the soil that has the most water is actually the one that retains the least. So let's remember that as we make our observations. Now, this is a great time to pause the video and write down your hypothesis. What do you wonder? What do you notice in your science journal? So take some time to do that now. So let's get started with the water. To get my 1/4 of a cup, I'm going to actually hold my coffee filter as I pour it in. And while that's pouring, while that's dripping down, I'm going to keep going. Now I'm going to try it with my sand. What did you notice that was happening right off the bat? Do we see any changes? Because sometimes the first time, if at first we don't see anything, well, we might need to try it again. And I just want you to observe this real quick. Let me move the camera. if you notice, when I pour it in, do you see what is happening? At first, it takes it some time to actually absorb all that water. And so now, as you can see, it's absorbing it, and then it's allowing it to drip down. And we have our topsoil that's still dripping. Now, I don't know about you, but our clay has enjoyed this water. It has been soaking up all of the water. So now, let's observe our final findings. All right, boys and girls. So, before I show you the final results, I want you to go back to your original hypothesis of which type of soil you think was going to retain, that, remember that means we're keeping it, was going to retain the most water. So go back to your science journal and just take a look. All right, boys and girls, so I'm going to go into each specific one. So first we have clay. Then we're gonna move into topsoil. Then we can move into sand. And I hope you're able to see that large difference. And then we have loam. And this is zooming in, so now zooming out, what do you notice? What are you noticing about this? So one thing that I noticed was that our clay and topsoil were almost identical. Now I was measuring the milliliters and they both came at about 90 milliliters. Now keep in mind, I got my clay and my topsoil in the same place. I'm not excavating, I'm not digging a hole to the center of the earth. I still just used these two soils to reach from that top part of the ground. Now notice sand. Look at all that water. Did it retain water as well as the topsoil or the clay? If you said no, you're right, it didn't. It did not retain as much water. So already what can we conclude is that sand has a low retention of water. We should not be using sand as our soil to plant our vegetables and our fruits, because I guarantee they're probably not going to live. And then we have loam. Oh, and I forgot to mention, sand measured at about 120 milliliters. We used about 120 milliliters with our 2/4 of a cup, which is our half of a cup. And then we have loam. Loam actually measured less than topsoil and clay. So loam is our soil that was able to retain the most water. What can we conclude from our experiment today? It is that loam, out of the 4 types of soil that we used, loam was able to retain the most water. And the one that retained the least water is sand. All right, guys, so I don't know about you, but I had an amazing time being able to experiment with you. Remember, you're writing down your findings. So everything that I just said, if you didn't get it, just rewind the video and you can watch that part again. So our loam was our soil that retained the most water. So if we're gonna plant, we probably might want to use our loam. And sand is the one that would retain the least amount of water. Look at all that water that just filtered through. I hope you guys had a great day today. I'll see you on the next lesson. Bye, guys.